Greetings everyone and welcome back to 365 Days of Prog. Today we're going to be reviewing the Masquerade Overture by the band Pendragon.
Hi, my name's Naomi. I'm an avid progressive rock fan, but I'm a long ways from knowing all the prog albums out there. But this year, I'm gonna give it a try. This is 365 Days of Prog.
So in today's video, I'm gonna do a mistake. Yes, it sounds kind of odd when I say it like this, but I am literally just gonna do something which is very mistaken. And that's going off script. Now, when I say off script, I mean no script for today's video. If you might know this already, I always have a script. I have this monitor right here and I have another monitor on here with a very nice script that I work a lot of time to create. And well, I created a script for this video and I was actually pretty proud of it. And then I wanted to copy it over so I can set it to myself over on the email. And I accidentally pasted another script on top of it and then exited the file, so then I couldn't retrieve it. I basically lost the entire script for this video and I am not in the right mood to actually rewrite it again because it takes a lot of time and a lot of, thinking and creativity. So we're gonna wing this one. Last time I did this was back in episode 41 when I reviewed Demons and Wizards by Uriah Heep, and that went horribly, so hopefully today it'll be just a bit better. Anyway, here's some of my favorite bits from this album. So here we go. So the last time when I did a review about Pendragon, it was actually all the way back in episode 63 when we reviewed the album Not of This World. Now this album happens to be the one that came right after the one we're reviewing today, which is the Masquerade Overture, released in 1996. Now back in that video, what I mainly focused on was talking about neo-prog, my personal relationship with neo-prog, and what I thought about it as an overall subgenre. But what I kinda missed doing in that video was just giving you a very good overview about the band themselves and what mainly led to the creation of today's album. So I think in order to compensate on that, we shall start with that. So here's a bit of backstory about Pendragon. So Pendragon were actually formed as a band called Zeus Pendragon back in 1978 in Gloucestershire in England. And while the name was pretty good, Nick Barrett, who was the founder of the band, actually decided to drop the Zeus part because in his eyes it didn't quite seem to fit on a t-shirt. And Pendragon started off in a quite mixed situation because on the one hand they were basically pioneering the second wave of prog, inspired by bands like Marillion but also Genesis, and working alongside IQ and others. These guys wanted to create neo-prog, and that definitely shows on their 1985 debut called Jewel. But it seems like the band had some sort of a change of heart afterwards because they decided instead of pursuing neo-prog, they wanted to pursue more accessible and commercially successful types of music. So with that change of heart, the band would come back onto the scene with their 1988 release called Kowtow, which is very much just your radio-friendly type of album, and its ratings over over on the Prog archives show that it doesn't have a lot to do with prog and prog lovers. But the band would realize that this direction that they were trying to take with their music wasn't going to be that successful, so in 1999 a big change was made when Pendragon formed their own record label called Toff Records. And with this sense of independence, the band would go on to create something more progressive and reinvent themselves as a neo-prog band, and this all started with the 1991 release called The World. And from that point onwards, the band would perfect their craft in creating progressive music, and they would get gradually better until reaching what is considered by many to be their peak, their 1996 record, which is the one we're reviewing today, called the Masquerade Overture. Now, Pendragon weren't really a very successful band, at least not in the start, and that probably has a lot to do with the way that they started off as being a more accessible and contemporary radio-friendly band rather than being a progressive rock band. But if there's one funny thing to note, is that their biggest following happened to be in Poland for no apparent reason really. I can't really think why that is. It's not like their music sounded a lot like Polish music in any way, but Poland is known to be one of the biggest hubs for Pendragon lovers, so the band performed there and basically gradually substantiated their fan base, mostly in the Polish community. And jumping right up until today, Pendragon is still a very active band, and in 2020 they even released an album considered to be one of their best so far, which is definitely a refresher seeing as this band is getting quite old. And their current lineup is surprisingly similar to the lineup of the album we're reviewing today, all the way back in 1996, with the original founder Nick Barrett still being the leader of the band and playing guitars and doing the vocals. Peter Chi is on the bass, Clive Nolan is playing a shitload of keyboards on today's album, and back then when the Masquerade Overture was made, their drummer was a man called Fudge Smith, a very good drummer which has a big impact on the sound of this album. Now, it's a funny thing about Pendragon, but their drummers always seems to change, so now their current drummer happens to be Jean-Vincent Velasco, and who knows when the next time it will change. Now, in a sense, this album is pretty straightforward, consisting of 7 separate tracks, with 2 of them being quite short and the rest of them averaging at around 8 minutes of runtime. Now, the album opens up with one of those shorter tracks being the title track of the Masquerade Overture, which acts as a sort of a prologue to everything that's gonna come. This one is very instrumentally based and has a lot of operatic influences in it, which I personally really loved, and as a beginning for an album, this one made for a very promising start. But when getting into the rest of this album, I feel like the overall quality of it kinda degraded, but not in a bad sense, but in a very unfortunate sense of sheer unused potential. And what I mean by that is that this album consists mainly of very lyrically based songs, and it's not the case that there isn't a focus on the instrumental sections, but it just seems like whenever the lyrics come on, it usually takes the front center of the stage, which just overshadows everything else that's going on. But in the brief 2-bar passages between segments of each song, you can definitely hear such a great amount of potential in various melodical ideas that are being played, although pretty much for a short while. And that's why I do have a slight grudge with this album, because it seems to be bursting on the seams with a lot of very good ideas and so much potential when it comes to the musical exploration, but it all comes down overshadowed by the lyrics and just the overall trying to tell a narrative story throughout the entire album. Honestly, this one would have been way better if there was just a bit more focus on creating instrumental sections. And yes, I am well aware that there are certain solos on here, and that's fine and all, but honestly, I do feel like they could have done more. But as a whole, I do believe that this album does hinder quite a lot to the past of prog, with references to bands like Camel, Yes, Pink Floyd, and of course overall with Genesis. But much like their next album, Not of This World, the band also has a very distinct and unique sound to themselves, which is something that I honestly quite appreciate about Pendragon. their ability to also sound like past bands and take inspirations from them while simultaneously having an undoubtedly unique sound of their own, and for that I do have some appreciation for this album. But when comparing the Masquerade Overture to Not of This World, I honestly really can't tell you which one is the better, and I view them both as some sort of equals, and maybe more listens would change my mind, but honestly I don't see myself coming back to this one in the same way that I didn't really come back to listening to Not of This World any more times after reviewing it. But yeah, hopefully I've done good so far, and this unscripted video is, you know, at least somewhat okay for your ears to listen. Now let's move on to the next section in which we talk about this album's cover. So starting from the album The World, Pendragon have adopted themselves a very unique style of cover art making for their albums. A sort of cover art which is drawn in the same way and is mostly just cluttered with a lot of references to the songs to be found throughout the album. And when I looked at Not of This World, I had one criticism towards it, and that was that it was just too overcrowded. But in today's case, I kind of find it more pleasing and better off looking when it comes to the overall balance and composition, so I can definitely say that I prefer this cover better. But as I said, still we can see a lot of references to the songs to be found on this album. For example, if you look at the bottom left corner, you can definitely see a painter, which I can only assume relates to the track called Paintbox. The wise Chinese figure with the chessboard in front of him is probably a reference to the track called Masters of Time, and in a somewhat more indirect way, I do believe that the track The Pursuit of Excellence actually refers to the Icarian figure that we can see next to the clock tower. And what I mean by that is that Icarus type figure with the wings that have melted and now he's falling towards the earth, and that sort of has something to do with the overall idea of that song. But yeah, as I said, overall I really like this cover. I actually like the colors being used on it. I like the fact that there's one set palette and not just all different colors of the rainbow all mashed together very unharmoniously, and I think that this cover is a pretty cool one, and honestly I wouldn't be surprised if this was used as some sort of a Where's Waldo type of image, because it really fits the bill. But yeah, when it comes to the rating of this one gets a similar rating to the one coming after it, and that is of course a 7 out of 10. But that's about it guys. Hopefully I've done my part correctly in this video, and despite it not being based on any script whatsoever, I still managed to do a decent enough job at it. Anyway, stay tuned for tomorrow because we're going to be reviewing Phaedra by the band Tangerine Dream. I of course want to thank my lovely supporters over on Patreon, so thank you so much to Clay, Juan, Rist of Kings, and Lindsay Haycox. You are the best, and if any of you want to support me over on Patreon, you can find the link down in the description or in my About page. But that's about it guys, have a wonderful day and I'll catch you all tomorrow. Bye guys.